Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast and joining me as Sports Radio 610 in front of the show, Shaun Bijani. And Shaun, I tell you what, I'd love to get your temperature as we start off the show on the Astros and where they're at about, 65, 70 games into the season now.
Well, after today, a 9-2 victory, they're hot as hell, right? 2 immaculate innings in one game. Great pitched ball game by Luis Garcia. The bats woke up. They hit with runners in scoring position. The bottom of the lineup was clicking today. No Jeremy Pena in the lineup, as he's obviously got that thumb injury. Siri for a second straight game. Look, baseball, there's an ebb and flow always, constantly, even when you're like the Atlanta Braves and you've reeled off 12, 13 ball games in a row. There's an ebb and flow. Sometimes you're getting breaks, sometimes you're not. The Astros, they haven't gotten, a lot of breaks, and teams usually don't during little slides and losing streaks. But sometimes you're not getting the breaks even when you're winning. The other team's just not getting the breaks. This is a talented team. I'm not ever worried about this squad. They're not even to the halfway point. They're just beyond the quarter pole. It's a fun baseball team again. And we've said that now for a good 5-6 years running, and it can't get much better than that if you love baseball and you're in the city of Houston.
You said ebb and flow and the ebb and flow of the season, but there's been not a ton of flow to the offense, and that's what I wanted to really get into you about. And I want to know, how do you fix the Astros lineup? And what I mean is the Astros love Maldonado's game manager ability too much to get rid of him. Center field's an option with Jake Myers now on the 60-day IL, or do you go after a first base option with Yuli's struggles? Because first base, sometimes one of the easiest positions to find if you're looking to maybe deal for somebody, but Yuli is Yuli. So I don't know what you do there.
Yuli's Yuli. In the last couple of days, really, he seemed to have put together some really good at-bats and has shown the production at the plate. And so it's almost like, as soon as you start even thinking about, tinkering with a guy or two, they seem to step up. Bregman's had a couple of little flashes this season. He had the really good start to the year and then hit a cold streak, seemed to get a little hot again. And now it's very, very ice cold for Bregman once again. But he's a professional hitter and he's a good ball player. All of these guys are really good at the plate. It's not even a year ago that we're talking about the quality of at-bats that this team had. These same guys had in the postseason. I know Bregman struggled, in particular, the ALCS towards the end and the World Series with his production. He was hurt. He's gotten it fixed, shortened spring training. I know he got up to the hot start, but, guys are a creature of habit, and routine is vital to this to these guys. I'm not ready to give up on anybody, really. Maldonado's bat is absolutely killer. I feel like it's gotten worse and worse the last really year and a half. I feel like this guy used to be like a routinely 220, 230 kind of hitter. The 180 slash mark is not going to get it done. If he's hitting 426-foot bombs once every 40 at bats, that's not going to do it. It's nice when you get it. It's impressive, and what he does behind the dish is incredible.
Hold that thought for a second, because we got to get into that. So the argument for not messing with Machete is his defense, like you said, and handling the pitching staff, or at least that's what you would think the argument should be. But he's 35 years old now. According to defensive metrics, Shaun, he's declining. His defensive WAR, 22nd in the league. You can see the slippage over the years. In these last few years, it's the numbers are starting to show it. And as far as handling the pitching staff has a 3.29 ERA with Maldi catching, 2.51 when Castro is catching. That's almost a full run worse with Maldi.
Who's Castro catching though?
Well, if that's the argument, last year Maldi and Castro's catching ERAs were identical. So there was no Justin Verlander last year. And, Castro's getting in like a fourth of the time. So it's not just Verlander. Plus, if anybody wants more info on this Maldonado defensive myth, there's a great piece Larrythegm.com did. So go check that out. But Shaun, I guess I'm saying you can trade for just about any catcher, and it's an upgrade over these two combined. I mean, both of them are terrible offensively. They're frankly together terrible defensively, but I'm sure the Astros don't want to trade major pieces because they have both Corey Lee and Yainer Diaz on the doorstep, although it doesn't look like Corey can hit either. He's not exactly much better than these guys, but you've got Yainer Diaz. You don't want to give up much, but at the same time, you got to figure out a way to get better in the lineup somewhere. And this seems like an obvious place to be. And Maldi, the defensive guy, if you think he's a wizard, even though, as we're speaking, I think there's 10 guys straight that have stolen off of him. Even if you think he's a defensive wizard, you can put him in late in games for that. That's what the defensive catcher is. And you get a guy that can hit a little bit in the first few innings of the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, you make really good points. I would just say this: it comes down to the willingness and how maybe the lack thereof would disrupt the chemistry in the dugout, in the locker room, and with handling the staff when he's not, out there 3-4 times a week. That's what would bother me. If he'd be down for a reduction in playing time, and you knew that you could get a little younger and a lot more productive at the plate, then I'd be all for it. We keep hearing the Cubs catcher. His name slips my mind. Is it Contreras?
Yes, that's it.
We keep hearing his name bandied about, and I didn't get a chance to read the article today, but there was a story about the Cubs pulling a team or two off the table, for a likely trade destination for him. I don't know whether or not that would be the Astros. I don't know why it would. But, look, Corey Lee, he's younger. He's shown some pop in the minors. And I kind of side with this, that when you're younger and you have pop, it's a lot easier to develop a guy than it is to change old habits. And with Maldi being 35, Castro being up in age, they are who they are as hitters. They might get hot for a stretch, but they might not. It's a lot easier, I think. And
the thing is, though, with Castro, let me just say this. Why do we have him around? I mean, it's nice that he's doing his last year with the Astros and Major League Baseball, but you can't just roll it out there. He's terrible offensively. He's never been all that good.
He is.
He last year, I know he hit in the clutch a little bit,
Yes.
and he gave you a little bit more, but that was last year. That was an anomaly. Come on, people. That was an anomaly. With a Castro that we've known for many, many years in the major leagues is not this guy. And if you want to upgrade, you can at least upgrade with the backup. And if that guy gets hot, maybe you put him in the lineup for 2 or 3 days in a row instead of having
Agreed.
Maldi out there shooting offers. And I'm going to just point out that I do see some signs that I like from Maldi as far as they changed his stance, which is about time, since I thought it was not working for the whole time he's been in the major leagues. And I didn't understand why he had such a long swing and nobody worked with him on that. And it looks like they've shortened the swing a little bit, and he's making more contact, and it's coming a little bit harder off the bat. But at the same time, I'm not going to depend on that. And my point is, you can definitely upgrade Castro. There's no question about that.
You can. But look, Castro is very highly thought of too as a personnel guy and handling the staff. He might have future coach, future manager in him one day. And the level of importance on keeping him around right now, you'd have to ask Dusty, you'd have to ask the rest of the staff. But I see that as a very, big factor, for the reason why they keep Castro around. As far as Maldonado goes, I don't see that changing at all. I mean, if there is a guy that would be considered like, a pulse of this organization right now, I think you'd have to include Maldi in that. Sure, it's easy to talk about guys like Altuve and Jordan and Tucker and Bregman and Brantley. Certainly, there's so many of those guys. That's why this team is great. But Maldi is definitely in that conversation as well. It is a concern, and I'll just say this, Robert. Like, I think the way that we talk about pitching in particular, and really hitting, I guess, really baseball in general, This sport has become so specific and specialized in positions and the demands that are placed upon each position. Okay, I think sometimes we expect too much. This team and no team is going to be anywhere close to perfect. Maybe right now, with everything that they've done on Moss this season, the New York Yankees are pretty damn close. But you're going to have your weak links. Is this team strong enough in other areas to supplant those struggles that the Astros have had at first base with Yuli at the plate, behind the dish with Maldi and Castro at the plate? I think yes, and proofs in the pudding. We've seen it before. It's always been a few guys step up, in August, September, and October when it really counts. We've seen it time and time again.
Well,
And
we've seen it not so much this year though,
not yet.
because they haven't had this type of struggles. I mean, Yuli hasn't been this bad except for that weird COVID year.
Yeah,
Bregman, you can tell me that Alex Bregman, we know what he can do. He hadn't done it since 2019, Shaun.
he had a really good start to the year.
Like a
The thing,
week. I
yeah,
mean,
but for a notoriously slow starter, a guy to come out that focused and that swinging the bat that well, and never mind what he was doing in the field, he was just good old regular Alex Bregman. Um, I just, you know, people want to talk about like, well, he got married and he's having a kid, and maybe that serves as a distraction and it's a new lifestyle and there's new concerns and worries and responsibilities for him. I don't know. These guys are human. Maybe that plays a little bit of a factor in it as well. Maybe he doesn't devote as much time to studying his craft at the plate. I don't know. I don't want to talk about that because it's a guy's personal life and we just don't know. I just know from what I see and what we've all seen, the guy's a hell of a ball player, and I'm willing to give him, and I think deservedly so, he deserves the time to fix it and to become that guy. He's not a 300 hitter. He's a career 280 hitter. He's going to drive in 90 for you, hit 25, 26 bombs a season, quite similarly to that of Yuli. Yuli's not going to hit for great average, but the on base percentage is what's really concerning for me. A guy that's, leading the team in doubles, and he's up there in a lot of the statistical categories except for average and on base and slugging. That's kind of worrisome for me. But it also comes down to having great at bats, and this team in large part has kind of fallen by the wayside a number of times this season, Robert, where they have not put together great quality at bats and prided themselves on really getting deeper into counts and finding their pitch. I go back to what Jose Altuve said before the season even started. I think he'd said it during spring training. A reporter, it might have been Chandler Rome, asked him, about his approach at the dish this year, what he's been working on. And he said he's really going to focus on not trying to hit as many home runs. Well, Altuve seems to have not lacked on the pop, but we know he's not a 275 hitter. We know this guy's a heck of a lot closer to, 295, 305. He's a 300 guy in this league. That's what he can be. That's what he's been. And so I just think it's the approach for a lot of these guys. Dusty Baker gave Alex Cintron a lot of credit after today's game, talking about how he's worked with some guys and they're starting to see the fruits of the labor pay off now. I think, you need to give it another 20, 30 ball games, really the rest of the season with this talented group. And you're going to see these kinds of ebbs and flows.
yeah, I wish I could say what you think about Alex Bregman, but the fact that I haven't seen that guy in 3 years is starting to really bother me. And this is not a 2 week sample size, a month sample size. This is nearly half a season sample size this year. Not to mention, we know the injuries last year, but we really didn't. We never saw a stretch, even when maybe he was healthy early in the year or something like that. We just didn't see that stretch at all last year. Obviously, he was terrible in the COVID season. I mean, he wasn't that good that year either. I mean, you got to go back to that 2019 season where he was really good, and you know, 5 extra base hits and no home runs in the last month. That's what you've gotten from Alex Bregman out of the 3 spot. And Shaun, I got to speak to Dusty's obsession with leaving Bregman in the 3 hole and his hatred and putting 2 lefties or 2 righties or whatever back to back. Remember that he expressed concern into that post game about consistently going with Tucker and Jordan back to back, even though the numbers explode this argument. I don't get it. Just look like if I can look at Baseball Reference, Dusty, you can look at Baseball Reference. The real story for his career, not just this year, Jordan, his OPS versus lefties is 921. It's better against righties, but that's Hall of Fame numbers, 921. Who else in your lineup is going to give you that anyway? Who cares? That's a Hall of Fame player right there. And for Kyle Tucker's career, his OPS is actually higher against lefties by 1 point when I checked prior to Wednesday's game. So it makes zero sense why Tucker and Jordan aren't batting third and fourth in the lineup. And you can even argue that Jordan and Shaun, you could make this argument that he could be batting third in the lineup because he's your best hitter.
Yeah, the statistics it's inarguable. Look at the numbers and they tell the story. I'll say this though, just trying to be objective, because I think we're all, looking at the numbers and wondering why Dusty's not doing this, not doing that. Why don't he tinker with this, move some guys up and down in the lineup? Why wouldn't you do that? Especially at this stage of the season. Look, you've seemingly taken full control of the AL West. And if there's ever opportune time to do something like this, now would be the time.
Or why hasn't Bregman asked Dusty to move him down in the lineup the same way we saw Altuve do it a couple of years ago when he was struggling?
We asked the same question last postseason, when Bregman was struggling, and we didn't get a reasonable or logical solution to that. I don't even think we got any explanation for that. But just having looked at this and using that as a prime point, much of the time, we're watching these games every day. We're looking at it through our lens, but not the Dusty lens, not the staff's lens. He's looking at a guy maybe that's grinding every single day, and whether that tugs at the heartstrings or not, he's going to give a guy like a professional opportunity to fix it. I think that happens. I think that's real. It's not the same for us. Like, we just want results and we want everything to be fixed.
Well, you can't wait. He couldn't wait in the World Series to do it because it's the World Series. He couldn't even do it then. Why would I expect him to do it in the regular season? He's going to ride or die with the guy, and it for his whole career, Justy, it's worked out. When it's long-term regular season, your guys trust you or whatever. But at some point, that's been Dusty's big fault. Sometimes he might stick with somebody too long because Dusty trusts the guy too much, and you wonder why he hadn't won a World Series with all of his playoff appearances and all the wins and everything like that. Sometimes it comes down to that. Sometimes you just got to go, hey, at some point, I love my guy. We're buds. I'm trying to love everybody in the clubhouse and make a point, but you got to pull it sometimes. You got to pull the ripcord on this. It's for the team, winning for the team. And I just don't get the Bregman love and why you stick him in the third spot. Frankly, he's at best the sixth best hitter in this lineup, maybe the seventh best hitter at this point. I mean, it's not even a question really when you look at the numbers.
Yeah, I'd like to go back and look and see, where maybe not particularly with Dusty, but even when AJ was here, what they've done with Bregman, to kind of get him going, different spots in the lineup that he's hit. Maybe that's useful. Maybe it's not useful, just given the production, that Jordan's now having in this lineup on a routine basis. Because the lineup is certainly a lot different now than it was, 3-4 years ago, even. But it's certainly worth a look. I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I'm just kind of offering a little perspective as to why maybe some of these changes haven't taken place. If it's me, I'm looking at it just how I broke it down. You've got control of the AL West right now. You're playing some pretty good baseball. Pitching is overperforming. And look, we've got to figure out what's going to work. And this may not be the first time you have to make a little change in your batting order, but go ahead and do it and see what happens. I can't imagine that any little tinkering, this team, which is laden with veterans and World Series and postseason experience, would take it to heart and have a bitter taste in their mouth from maybe being moved down in the lineup 2 or 3 notches to help them out.
And if you get moved down in the lineup, it doesn't mean we can't move you back up. This isn't permanent.
Exactly. But you know how it goes. I mean, there's always a reason. There's always a reason. And, with Dusty, I don't know if this was, maybe a major criticism of him in San Francisco for all those years, maybe in Cincinnati. I don't know, maybe wherever he's been. But well, he's a former player, and he's a player's manager. We've heard that term throughout sport. Maybe that's what is biting him in the butt. But I also think that's what's helped him to, his enormous success as a manager in the majors, and still does to this day with this talented roster.
What do you think of Metachevich? Because they just brought him up as an option to maybe sub for Yuli, hitting 313, over 1,000 OPS in Sugarland, bats left. So you'd think platooning him with Yuli makes sense. But then when you looked at the numbers, Yuli's OPS 66 points higher versus righties than lefties. I think you got to play him, though, over Yuli quite a bit and use this as a trial period before the trade deadline, because we could say we know what Yuli is, but he's also 38 years old, and we know father time's undefeated.
I think the guy has performed at the minor league level. He's going to get an opportunity, but I go back to this. Yuli started to really look a lot better at the plate the last couple of games. He's taking some better at bats. I went on Saturday actually. Now everybody underwhelmed Saturday, but Yuli took some really good hacks. And I like what I'm seeing from him at the plate. And I'd be so inclined to think that Dusty's going to be giving Yuli every opportunity during this stretch to kind of break out of this slump, the short series in Texas before they come back home, a place that they have played the fewest out of any team in the majors, an opportunity to come in and get settled in. I also think, Matevich is going to get, some real good looks too. Maybe, late in the ball game kind of action. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets a start, when they come back home, just to kind of get him settled in and to see what the guy can do in a day's routine, if you will. I think this is a great time to do it. You mentioned the trade deadline. I don't know if that has, great impact for Dusty or Click for, those positions in particular. But I think they're just trying to find guys right now that can be productive later in the season, but also give guys a spell. If they need to work some kinks out, then we have to have guys step up at this point in time. And Siri's been a guy that could do that. Aledmus Diaz has been a guy that could do that. Let's see if Matevich is going to be another guy that can give the Astros a little bit of breathing room to help some guys work some kinks out.
I'm going to give you Hunter Brown's numbers in Sugarland at the moment. Speaking of guys that might be able to help you as the season moves along. Yeah. 12 games, 52 innings, 2.25 ERA, 1.154 WHIP, 73 strikeouts, 25 walks. The stuff is just crazy. If you've seen the videos of Hunter Brown, should they bring him up as a reliever? And I say reliever because you risk serious injury if he's immediately jumping into a big league season with the playoffs too. So, that's what he would be for you if you want to have his help in the offseason. He would be a reliever, and there's obviously spots in the bullpen that you could upgrade.
Man, trust we know that to be fact. Yeah. The guy's numbers are sexy as hell, man. Like, we've heard his name for quite a while now, and he's done nothing but prove himself. He deserves an opportunity. Whether the Astros do it or not, the more and more I look at this situation, it's hard for me to get a pulse. Like, I think I know the answer, similarly to, what we're talking about with Dusty and Bregman and Yuli and Maldonado. And, why are these guys still in there? I think Dusty's going to continue to give these guys opportunities to work themselves out. I wouldn't be surprised. I would be shocked, in fact. I would be shocked if Hunter Brown wasn't called up, in September when rosters do expand. Beyond that, like, if he's called up before, I think it comes down to injury, and they just can't afford to waste this guy his talent in the year 2022 in the minor leagues. You're going to have to give him a cup of coffee in the bigs and see if he can produce for you. And look, at the end of the day, if the guy keeps putting up those numbers and shows that he's big league ready, there's only so much a big league team can do at some point. You're going to have to bring him up. So I think it absolutely happens. There's no question about that. It's just when.
Yeah, and I've said it before, but just to leave the note for anybody that hasn't seen me or watched the podcast or listened to us before, Anoli Paredes, his numbers are looking pretty good in Sugarland this year. He had a great arm a couple of years ago. It looks like he's
Yeah.
gotten back to what he was, and his controls a little bit better. And that's another guy to think about. Before I pivot to, because I want to get to some Rockets conversation, Shaun, but just want to remind everybody who regularly listens to the show, subscribe on my YouTube page if you haven't already. It doesn't cost you anything in this, inflation. It costs you nothing. You don't have to watch a single video. Just takes a couple of quick seconds and a click subscribe. It's a super easy way to support the show. And if you already subscribed, really want to thank you. And Shaun, let's get to the Rockets, because what do you think of likely future Rocket Paolo Banchero? That's going to likely be the guy in 8 days, unless there's a shocking revelation that I'm not expecting in the next week or so.
Everything that I've read from, Sports Illustrated guys, all the national publications, really, they've got this guy, Pablo, going to the Rockets. And,
Well, you're gonna have to learn his name. It's Paolo, not Pablo. Don't
Paolo,
don't get that messed up.
man, I'm thinking of Pablo Prigioni, maybe.
Oh
But
no, don't think of
that was my
it.
guy. Yeah, Paolo. Boy, he's got a sexy name too. Talking about the freaking numbers, for uh, Astros prospects. But everybody I've looked at, and I've got it pulled up here. I mean, it's just crazy. Like it's across the board, and I feel like this guy almost came out of nowhere, because I don't feel like it was that long ago. And I talked to my brother, Ali Khan, who's does Rocket Insider on Twitter and a fantastic job writing for The Athletic. I mean, he's been, I think, um, everywhere else but Paolo Banchero. I don't know his thoughts on this, but I've looked at his highlight reel. You told me we were going to talk about this a couple of days ago, and I was looking at it last night, and I mean, I'm blown away. I love the guy's skill set. He looks incredibly talented. Looks like he might seamlessly fit in with his game with this Rockets. However, I think we probably all are, like, a little skeptical about the direction of this team right now, like what's going to happen with Christian Wood. And I think there's a lot of players on this team, like, who's really going to be a part of this. But, you know, this guy looks like an incredible talent. And in the NBA this day and age, like with the way that the game has, I think, changed just over the last 10, 15, 20 years, boy, right time, right place, right organization. Does this Rockets team have the right staff to continue to develop him and grow him within this roster? Are they ready to take the next step? I think that's a huge question when you're talking about a guy like Paolo, because, you know, as talented as he looks to me, all of these guys in the first round outside of your top five picks, are very, very raw, and they could go either way. I hear a lot about Chet Holmgren, and I look at that guy and I'm just not buying it, man. I'm just not buying it at the next level. It's a hard pass for me for him. Um, Paolo is pretty dang close, but I'm not going to say like it is lock him up and throw away the key type of situation. Do the Rockets have the staff put in place and the talent on this team to help him grow his game?
Well, I don't know if you know, but at the moment they don't have a staff outside of Steven Silas and John Lucas, because they got rid of a bunch of the assistant coaches. So yeah, that's going to be a question mark. But
Yeah.
you just got to get the talent, and if the staff is wrong, that's an easy replacement. But you don't get a chance to get these top three picks that often. Paulo looks like the obvious one that would be there for the Rockets. It looks like this is a top three draft. It looks like, Paulo is, absolutely one of those three guys, and you can debate which one should be higher. Early this year, he was the absolute number one guy, and then Jabari Smith took over, and
Yeah.
Chet was talked about as well, and there was a big debate or whatever. And look, the one thing that you're concerned about, and everybody knows this: defense, defense, defense. And I don't know how long it's going to take him to be good defensively, but the other two guys that are going to be picked out of him, I think, are going to be way better defensively and much more likely to change the Rockets defensive look overnight, which is where they need the change to happen since they were dead last. And
Yeah.
if Paolo is a Rocket, though, the one thing that I will say is Kevin Porter Jr., his only role as a point guard should be bringing the ball up the floor, because what Paolo can do, and I'll look at it as positives, is he's a great distributor, great passer. And you want Paolo, Şengün, or Jalen Green initiating this offense, not Kevin Porter, because, also this is respect to Kevin Porter. He's become a really good 3-point shooter. So there's no question the best way to utilize him is, if he's the guy to bring it up the court, fine. But once you get there, Şengün and Paolo can be elite distributors from what I've seen of Paulo's game at Duke and what I've seen with Şengün so far. Obviously, there's no question he's an elite distributor if you watch them this year at all.
I see the willingness, from Paolo to be a plus defender, in the NBA. I mean, he had, flashes, I recall at Duke. And everything that I've read, scouting reports, I mean, they say that it's there. The willingness is there. It's, is he going to have the talent around him? And this is kind of where I go back to, are you going to have the talent around you? Because all the other 4 guys on the court help you become a better defender. But at the impetus for everybody, it comes down to will. Is this a part of the game? Never mind, your shooting touch or your scoring ability or your craftiness or whatever the case may be offensively, but defensively, do you have the willingness to be better? Can
watch Pritchard in the NBA Finals and tell me that guy is not giving you everything he's got and doing a really good job defensively, even though he's limited. Pritchard is not a good athlete at all. He's a bad athlete by NBA standards, but look what he's done with the Celtics in the finals.
Look, and there's guys like that. Just get it, like what am I going to bring that is invaluable, irreplaceable, and understanding your weaknesses? Okay, look, I'm limited offensively, but I got guys to pick me up. Where can I add the most value in a particular situation, in a particular series, an NBA Finals? Defense, like, yeah, he's not a terrific athlete, but come on, it comes down to positioning and angles and understanding switches and just the game. You can look like a better athlete if you understand the scheme. And how smart of a basketball player, what is Paolo Banchero's basketball IQ? These are all questions. To me, it's got to be very high. You don't get considered, you don't get talked about. If you're Jabari Smith, if you're Chet Holmgren, if you're a Paolo Banchero, you're not talked about as a top 3, top 5, hell, even a top 10 pick in most drafts if you're not a smart basketball mind. With the rare exception of you being maybe an uber talented kind of, freak, which I don't really think that we have in this draft. And I can't recall really the last draft where I was like, ooh, wow, here's this one guy or one or 2 guys that's this incredible athletic freak outlier. You know what I'm saying?
Zion would be that guy.
You know what? Yeah, I guess, but
well, he just hasn't been healthy. That's the problem. I mean, there's no question. He's an incredible athlete. When he was healthy a year ago, that season he was great.
I'm not. You're not going to get a big argument from me. I was not sold on Zion. Something about him told me the guy's not going to last. I don't know if it was his size and the way that he played the game that maybe I talked myself into, and so far I've been right. Like a lot of other people, I think that he's just not long for the game in the NBA. His body's going to give out on him. And I just think we saw those outliers, those flags in college. And, all that to say this, we're talking these guys up there. Banchero's uberly talented. I'm looking at it through maybe my Rockets lens. It's time for this team to take the next step. It really is. And I thought last year we've had passionate conversations about this, on this podcast, Robert, you and I have, about how skilled and talented I think this Rockets roster is. And I think, to some degree you agree as well, but there's just a whole lot of me players, there's not been a whole lot of chemistry. And is Banchero going to be a guy that can come in and, be that additive to selfless team basketball, for this Rockets team to take the next step? And everything that I remember watching at Duke and so far having read, I think, yes, he absolutely can be. But is he better than Jamari Smith if he's available at 3?
Well, Jamari Smith is not going to be available at 3, so I can tell you that for a fact. But just we got to wrap it up real quick. But my 3 favorite options of the guys that are likely to be on the board at 17, I'm just going to say Santa Clara's Jalen Williams, G League Ignites Marchon Beauchamp, and LSU's Tari Eason, all 3 wing defenders with big wingspans. The Rockets need that pretty badly. I've become really concerned about Eason after some bad draft workouts and interviews that are floating out there. No idea what to make of those leaks, but that's something to mention. DeAndre Ayton, do you have a desire to get him if he becomes available for the Rockets? Because Rockets Twitter discussing the idea for the sign and trade, and I don't know if there's any smoke to the idea or it's just wishful thinking that the Suns or the Rockets would be interested in doing a sign and trade here. But would you want him?
DeAndre Ayton is, an exceptional basketball player, I think, Robert. Um, he's about as versatile, I think, as a center as you can find in the NBA. Having said that, I don't know that he's feasible for the Rockets, for what they're trying to do. Is he going to be a cornerstone for this organization for the foreseeable future if, in fact, they're able to nab him? And that means, for the next 4, 5, 6 seasons.
He's 22.
Is he who he is by now? Is there room for growth? I think that's a concern for me. Hell of a basketball player in Phoenix. He had a Hall of Fame point guard running the show for him, and Chris Paul. He rebounds well, solid defender. I guess my biggest concern for him is offensively. Outside of being a lob guy, he's got like a little jump hook through the lane, and I just don't know if his game offensively is going to, I think, develop to the next level. Like Clint Capella, was a guy who got a lot of that criticism, but, he just kind of fit for what the Rockets needed from him and wanted in that system with James Harden running the show. DeAndre Ayton, it's so hard for me to say right now because I know what he's going to cost you. I know he's young, but I don't know if that is worth it for this guy. How many other guys out there for what the Rockets are looking for from that big man position could give you something similar for much less money? And you could utilize that on, a dynamic wing player or another point guard, down the road. I just don't see him as a Houston Rocket. So, it's a hard pass for me, I think.
Yeah, I think there are people out there that look at him and go, he's not the ideal center in this sort of you got to guard guys on the perimeter, switch heavy playoff type of basketball. But let me just point out, he's anchored one of the best defenses in the NBA the last 2 years, one of the best teams in the NBA at center. Not only is he a really good defensive center, and yeah, he's not great for guarding perimeter guards, but it's tough to find that guy that can guard the big guy and guard the perimeter guy, and he can definitely guard big men. But offensively, he's got a pretty solid jumper from about 14 to 16 feet. He's got a good mid-range jumper, and in today's NBA playoffs, I think we've seen with the Rockets, if you're just relying on threes and layups, sometimes they're not going to be there, and you've got to be able to hit a mid-range shot, which is one of his real tricks that he does. That's, I think it's valuable right now, but it's not just that he's a really good defensive player, but I think the fact that he knows how to communicate, and that's what you've got to do to be a great defensive player in the playoffs. He knows that from being around the Suns and being around Chris Paul and being around Miles Bridges and all of that. That is a big deal to impart on this young team that needs to learn how to play defense.
Hey,
Shaun, that to me, that's the thing that I want from him. I want somebody that changes the culture, and I don't worry about spending the money, because who cares that you're spending money on one guy like this? Because Jalen Green, you're not going to have to spend money on him for 4 years. Paulo for 5 years.
no,
Those are
you're right, but
that's the thing. You've got money to spend right now.
is it the right guy? And I'd have to go back and look. I mean, I'm kind of going just off of what I've seen from him, the last few years, and I got to look at and I trust you, but I got to look and see what kind of mid-range game he has and how reliable he is in terms of being just 22 years old. Can I trust him to continue to develop and get better and polish his offensive game? And, what is his ceiling? Good basketball player, and again, the versatility is certainly there. Is it going to fit for what the Rockets want and need out of that spot right now? And the money is an issue for me because, yeah, like you don't mind spending it and it's not ours to spend, but if you're going to spend near max money on a guy, is that the guy you want to spend it on? I don't know. I feel like you could do better. Maybe not that particular position, but for what the Rockets would be looking to potentially give up in terms of dollars and cents and a direction of this organization, which I still feel like is very foggy at this point in time. I don't know. I like him. I just don't know if he's a Rocket.
One thing that I will say is you can say different positions, but it matters to have a defensive big if you want to win a championship. And this guy's 22 years old, and you look at the Celtics that are in the finals, and Robert Williams has been their best plus minus guy. He's a fantastic big. He's the reason that they're there. That was the game changer for the Celtics this year defensively. As far as the Golden State Warriors, you've got Draymond Green in the middle. You've got Kevon Looney, who's been the most underrated guy in the entire playoffs, as their center. And it's not like Kevin Looney, you don't think of DeAndre Ayton as this great shot blocker and rim protector, but he's great around the basket and he's great at causing guys to, re-angle their shots. But Kevon Looney's not one of those guys either, but he's just to have that guy in the middle that's a great defensive player is a big deal. And it's not often where some guy like that is out there that maybe you can grab. Now, I don't know, I'm not paying him max money, but if you're telling me maybe we could get him for $30 million a year or something like that on a 4 or 5 year deal, yeah, I could see totally being in on that, depending on what other, what all the Phoenix wants back for him. And Phoenix is not really in position at this time to ask for much back from him, Shaun, because guess what? He's a free agent. And, they could have extended him. They weren't interested because they weren't interested in paying the money for somebody like him, or they weren't interested in going over the luxury tax because Sarver's cheap. But I just think, if he's interested in the Rockets and there's mutual interest, I would not be sad if they did this. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be sad either. I just want it to be the right move. I've grown maybe just as impatient as everybody else with the demise of this organization and its struggle to get back up to where they belong. At least at this point in time, from what you would expect, just a level of respectability. And can he be a major part of that? Maybe so. You mentioned a very important word, and you and I've talked about it before: culture, being a culture fit, being a guy that is going to, be a player, win at all cost. The Chris Paul pedigree, that he might bring, having played with him, on the court. I think that can be invaluable. I won't kick him out of bed, and I would love to, put my doubts aside and just ride with you on this one. I can just say, like, if it's a deal that the Rockets can get done for in and around the $30 million per year mark, yeah, I won't hate it. But you can't pay this guy max money, even at the age of 22, and even as good a ball player as he is, just because I struggle with doing that if you're a team in this position that the Rockets are with no real identity right now.
The thing about the max money is I don't know who's giving that to him. I haven't heard anybody being rumored to want to give him max money. Somebody's got to want to give him. They can say we want max money, but if they don't have anybody out there asking for that, now again, I don't know if he would want to go from one of the best teams in the NBA to the worst team in the NBA the last couple of years. But he might look at the situation as, hey, I can grow with these
Yeah,
guys. I
I get
like
it.
Houston. Houston's got this great big man tradition that I can jump into with Elijah and Yao and Moses and all those guys. But it just let me put it this way: I don't think it's going to happen. But if the opportunity was there, I would seriously look into it, and if the price is right, I would definitely do it. Shaun, before I finish up, I want to give a little love to Texans tackle Titus Howard because he posted on Twitter that starting in a couple of weeks, he's going to live Twitch 5 times a week, or going live on Twitch, I should say, 5 times a week, interacting with fans and holding streaming series where he'll play against the fans in Madden. And Shaun, the Texans, they need all the fan good will that they can get at this point. I mean, don't they? The goodwill is like in short supply with the Texans, and I love that Titus Howard is using the modern means to interact with guys. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I just don't think that's uh, the age of the fan base that is really hurting for the attention, the love. I think the fan base that has grown frustrated are the 30, 40, 50 somethings out there that have been through the trials and tribulations of this organization for the last 22 years since its inception, and that have seen and smelt and maybe even almost tasted this organization taking the next step.
Yeah, that's a good
um,
point. It's a good point.
Look, I'm not going to kick a guy for trying, okay, and appealing to that demographic, that age group, the teens, the early 20s, mid 20s, even, like there's a lot of guys out there even my age still, Madden heads, that love to go get it. Hey, awesome. But it's a start, a very minute start, but it's a start for them. Um, this organization just has to simply, and I say simply, like just fundamentally come across as a competent, you know, okay run organization. Just coming off of everything that has happened over the course of the last couple of years, it really needs to come from the players on Sundays, but between games, we really need to see and hear and feel like there is growth. And that comes from Lovey Smith on up. Um, and everybody that's going to stick themselves in front of a microphone and a camera that represents them. That's what it comes down to. And certain people we don't need to maybe see or hear so much from. Hashtag Cal McNair. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, well, no question about that. And the one thing that has been really positive with the Texans in the last few weeks, and has nothing to do with them, is Deshaun Watson. The hole's getting deeper and deeper, and at some point,
All by
you're
design.
at some point you got to realize, hey, Casario did an incredible job getting out of that Deshaun thing as at the right time before it got worse, before you couldn't have gotten much for Deshaun. Number one, number two, that is also a huge benefit if he's maybe suspended for a while this year or doesn't play at all this year because they decide to suspend him for a whole year. What that means to the Texans draft choices next year is huge, huge.
No question. No question. I don't know what's going to happen with this thing. I mean, I heard Mike Florio of ProFootballTalk.com talk about a week and a half ago saying that Deshaun Watson, it's a possibility that he thinks he may not play football for 3 years. Having missed last year, and maybe Tony Busby and the allegations continue to draw this thing out more and more and more. The NFL has to wait on handing down a suspension or a punishment, rather, and this thing goes to court, and maybe he's suspended next season. and he misses 3 total years of the NFL. I don't know. I guess anything is possible. I don't necessarily buy that one, but this is incredible. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are following this just like their favorite TV drama, on cable or whatever. I'm doing the same thing. I mean, it's kind of fantasy, but I'm looking at maybe like Tony Busby as like my Saul Goodman character from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Like he is just orchestrating these drops like perfectly. Just when you think this is the week that the NFL has it all and they're going to levy a punishment, bam, here's another 2 lawsuits. Bam, here's an interview from the Harris County detective that conducted the interview and investigation on the Shaun, and here's what she's got to say. Bam, here's another lawsuit today. It's up to 26 now. This is just crazy. When does it end? When does it stop? I mean, emotions aside, like I'm not like kicking the guy while he's down. I just can't wait to see what happens next. And whatever his future means for the Texans, draft status wise, look, the Texans are the Texans now. They have washed their hands with that situation, and they're going to have to, the only dealing they'll have with him is, legally now and potentially in the court, if it ever does go to trial, since they've been named in a lawsuit. So, you kind of watch it with a side eye, but at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want this organization to be able to move past this. And I think it's going to take a couple of years to do so, because the damage that has been done here from a fan perspective, from an organizational perspective, from its reputation in the NFL, and it's not just been Cal, it's not just been the Caserio debacle, and having, trying to nab him from New England 3 years ago to Bill O'Brien. It's all of that. And it's just been a very negative, downhill slide for football in Houston. And I can't wait to get back to that trajectory upwards. And I think this season has the potential to do just that. In terms of wins and losses, I don't know. You're going to see 4 more, 5 more. You're going to see 3. I don't know. I think it's just going to be a hell of a lot more competitive and real football being played.
I'm cautiously optimistic about Davis Mills. I'm cautiously optimistic about this draft. A couple of guys in the draft wasn't super enthused about from what I heard about them, but for the most part, the guys in the draft, I'm very excited about. We've had some people talking about some of the draft picks on the podcast. They've got me excited about them. So we'll see. But with the Texans, cautiously optimistic. And the Rockets, it's going to be fun to see what happens in a week and what they do with that second pick in the draft. And I'm doubting still all these, versions that maybe it's, Chet ends up at 3 or whatever. Look, Jabari's going to be gone. I can promise you that. But there is a chance that Chet could be there at 3. So and I wouldn't be disappointed with that, because there's some stuff about him that I really love. But it's the fun part to me, I think, is really going to be what they do with that other pick. If they decide to trade up, if they decide to trade out, if some of the other players on the Rockets, I would love to see, maybe they move along during the draft.
Yeah.
Some of the veterans on the roster wouldn't disappoint me at all. But yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what they do. And
I always like to have fun with these sorts of things, like, the 17th pick in the NBA draft. Like, who are the really good just really good players to be taken 17th overall in NBA draft history? Like, you have to go all the way back, I think, about 13, 14 years to when Drew Holiday was taken in 2008, 2009, whatever it was. I mean, it's pretty sparse. But in the 2000s, like, there were some really good players taken at 17th overall in the draft. I mean, I mentioned, let's see if I can pull it up. Drew Holiday, Roy Hibbert, Amon Shumpert, Tyler Zeller, Dennis Schroeder. Yeah, and that's it. Maybe Dante DiVincenzo. Like, he's probably been the best player to come out of the 17th overall pick in the last 5 years, and that's not saying a whole lot. Still young, still developing, but I say that just to temper your expectations and maybe a level of importance on what comes out of the 17th pick for the Rockets, unless they move up, of course.
Yeah, I would love to see them move up. Great to have you with us. I know you're going to be making some appearances a lot over the next month or so on Sports Radio
Back
610.
in the
So
saddle, baby.
yeah, that's going to be awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you call in and give me some help.
Oh yeah, would love to do that, and can't thank you enough for doing this and staying a little bit longer than I think we planned. But just so much good stuff to talk about. Really, thanks a bunch for doing it.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate you.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.